Hello students, welcome to the lecture on action planning. And after the lecture, we will be able to learn the following objectives. Understand the concept of action planning, explain the agenda of action planning, discuss the affirmative action plan, explain the strategic HR planning, describe the employee retention plan, understand managing redundancy, describe the recent trends and practices in HRP. Let's start with a brief introduction to action planning. Action planning is a process which will help one to focus the ideas and to decide what steps one needs to take to achieve particular goals that one may have. It is a statement of what one wants to achieve over a given period of time. Preparing an action plan is a good way to help one to reach the objectives in life. Do not worry about the future. Start planning it. Let's now understand the concept of action planning. Action planning is the process that guides the day-to-day activities of an organization or project. It is the process of planning what needs to be done, when it needs to be done, by whom it needs to be done, and what resources or inputs are needed to do it. It is the process of operationalizing strategic objectives. That is why it is also called operational planning. Most action plans consist of the elements like a statement of what must be achieved, a spelling out of the steps that have to be followed to reach this objective, some kind of time schedule for when each step must take place, and how long it is likely to take. A clarification of who will be responsible for making sure that each step is successfully completed. A clarification of the inputs, resources that are needed. Now we will talk about strategic HR planning. Strategic HR planning is an important component of strategic HR management. It links HR management directly to the strategic plan of your organization. Most mid to large-sized organizations have a strategic plan that guides them in successfully meeting their missions. Organizations routinely complete financial plans to ensure they achieve organizational goals, and while workforce plans are not as common, they are just as important. Resourcing. Action planning is the process in which one will plan what will happen in the project or organization in a given period of time and clarify what resources are needed to make it possible. The resources one needs to carry out an action plan include people, time, space, equipment. Importance to include all staff at this stage. The more informed administrative staff is about the activities of the professional staff with whom they work, the more likely they are to do a good job. Think, for example, of the project administrator who often has to deal with stakeholders on the telephone or to deal with crisis while professional staff is out in the field. The more she or he knows about the work, the more helpful she or he is likely to be. Now we will discuss about the action planning agenda. Planning an agenda for an action planning process is very different from planning an agenda for a strategic planning process. In a strategic planning process, it is important to take people through a strategic thinking exercise, which helps them focus on the big picture. In an action planning process, the focus is on the detail, on making sure that things happen as they are supposed to and when they are supposed to. Typical agenda for action planning process. Clarify the result areas on which one will be. For each result area, List the steps necessary to achieve it. Sequence the steps in a logical order using a tool such as the Gantt chart. Do a summary of the outputs. Assign responsibility for each of the activities involved. Do a summary of the human resourcing needs. Do a summary of likely costs. Put it all together in a work plan schedule. Planning activities. Activities are the steps that one needs to take in order to get the results which will contribute to the achievement of the organization's or project's goals and objectives. So, the starting point is what one wants to achieve, and this then gets broken down into the steps required to achieve the result. These steps need to be put in a logical sequence, and someone must take responsibility for making sure they happen. Developing action plans or work plans. Action plans specify the actions needed to address each of the top organizational issues and to reach each of the associated goals, who will complete each action and according to what timeline. Develop an overall top-level action plan that depicts how each strategic goal will be reached. Develop an action plan for each major function in the organization. Example, marketing, development, finance, personnel, and for each program, service, etc. The format of the action plan depends on the nature and needs of the organization. Let's now talk about affirmative action plan. An affirmative action plan or program is a management tool designed to ensure equal employment opportunity. A central premise underlying affirmative action is that, over time, absent discrimination, a contractor's workforce will generally reflect the gender, racial, and ethnic profile of the labor pools from which the contractor recruits and selects. An affirmative action program also ensures equal employment opportunity by institutionalizing the contractor's commitment to equality in every aspect of the employment process. Therefore, as part of its affirmative action program, a contractor monitors and examines its employment decisions and compensation systems to evaluate the impact of those systems on women and minorities. Now, we will get to know about strategic HR planning. Strategic human resources, HR planning, is the link between management and the strategic plan of the business. The objective of strategic HR planning is to ensure that a business has adequate human resources in order for the business to achieve its goals. The strategic HR planning process includes conducting a situational analysis, assessing a business's human resources capacity, forecasting demand, and developing an action plan. The main objective of strategic HR planning is to meet the future needs of the organization. In order for this department to meet its objective, it has to clearly understand the current situation and what the plan requires. If the company wants to develop new products, reach new markets, or expand operations, then it may need additional human capital to fulfill its goals. Here we will talk about workforce planning. Workforce planning is a strategic process in which businesses determine how to locate and hire qualified employees. Business leaders use workforce planning to evaluate their current staff in order to make determinations on which areas of the company require the most improvement. By using a process called environmental scanning, companies also rate their talent in comparison with other industries similar to theirs. strategic workforce planning. Strategic workforce planning is derived from the capitalization of an organization and its management of the human resource capital in an organization. This process involves the alignment of the workforce with the identified aims and objectives of the organization. It also involves the identification of the salient capital needs of the organization in relation to the objectives at hand. One of the elements of strategic workforce planning is the study of the organization in order to discover the organization's goals and corporate objectives. Part of a general organizational strategy is the development of objectives and goals that the organization will work toward achieving. Such a study will also include an assessment of the operations of the company, its current recruitment strategy, and other types of human resource responsibilities. Different strategic management process components. There are usually 3 to 4 strategic management process components, depending on the way the system is used. The process always includes the formulation, implementation, and evaluation of the strategy. In many cases, an environment or situation analysis is performed before the other steps. If it is used, the situation analysis is the first of the strategic management components. This review can be performed in a variety of ways. One of the most common is the strengths, weaknesses, opportunities, and threats, SWOT analysis. The next of the strategic management process components is strategy formulation. This is the planning stage, in which the tasks associated with implementing the strategy are outlined. In this step, it is also usually determined what resources such as financing, tools, and skills are needed to achieve the goal. It can be helpful to picture the completed organizational goal and then work backward, envisioning which specific steps would lead to success. Strategy implementation is the next of the strategic management process components. It is essentially putting the plan into action. This includes educating the workforce on what needs to be done, delegating tasks, and completing the work. Once the plan has been put into motion, it will often be necessary to make some adjustments to the strategy. Strategic capacity planning. Strategic capacity planning is a process that seeks to balance the use of available resources so that they are used to the best effect while resulting in the optimum level of output. In many businesses, this involves giving a great deal of attention to each step in the production process to ensure that little to no waste is created during that process, and the cost of production is kept as low as possible while the greatest quantity of goods and services are produced and sold. Let's talk about an employee retention plan. An employee retention plan is a plan for operating a business using techniques designed to keep good employees. Employee retention is beneficial for the business because retaining employees reduces costs spent hiring and training new employees to replace lost employees. Factors that affect employee retention are many and include rewards, communication, and a sense of purpose in the job. Rewards constitute an important part of a successful employee retention plan, but they must be rewards that employees want. Many employers make the mistake of trying to guess at what rewards employees want out of a job situation. Often, listening to the employees and asking them what they want can reveal problems that can be easily solved or desires that can be fulfilled for minimal extra cost. Poor employee retention can be an indication of overall problems in the company. No matter what steps an employer takes in an employee retention plan, rewards and incentives will only serve as a temporary fix for fundamental problems in the company. Employee retention strategy. An employee retention strategy is a plan developed and used by a company to create and maintain employee loyalty and keep employees from going to competitors. One of the first things one can do to develop such a strategy is to have a sense of which employees one wants to keep. While high turnaround is typically not beneficial for a company, depending on the resources, one may need to assume that some people will leave for a number of different reasons. Retention ratio. Retention ratio refers to the percentage of a company's earnings that are not paid out as dividends to stockholders and are held back by the company. The earnings that are reinvested in the business are called retained earnings or retained capital. To calculate the ratio, a person can deduct the dividends from the company's net income and divide that total by the net income. The term can also refer to customer retention or insurance retention. Insurance retention ratio is the amount of business an insurance company retains. This is calculated based on premiums or the amount each person pays for insurance coverage. Paid premiums represent sales. In insurance, this ratio is the percentage of invoiced or written premiums compared to the number of premiums that are actually paid, called gross premiums. Let's discuss about managing redundancy. Redundancy is one of the most traumatic events an employee may experience, but the negative effects can be reduced by sensitive handling of redundant employees and those remaining. There are 7 key stages to good redundancy management. 1. Strategy. There are many factors that influence an organization and result in a review of process and people with the aim of reducing costs to improve effectiveness, productivity, and competitiveness, often as a result of market downturn, falling profits, funding or cash flow crisis, outsourcing, company merger, or loss of a major contract. 2. Minimizing redundancies. Having developed a plan in consultation with all key stakeholders, the next phase is to carefully examine all avenues for minimizing job cuts and the damaging effects of redundancy. With this objective in mind, few methods have been used successfully by a variety of organizations. Redeployment into other areas of the business. Flexible work practices such as job sharing schemes and part-time working arrangements. Early retirement, natural wastage, and voluntary retrenchments. Voluntary pay cuts. 3. Selection. The care and attention needs to be given to selecting the positions and people. Key actions include aligning the consultation and notification obligations with current legislation, establishing the criteria to determine which positions should be selected, giving individual consideration to each position. Consider whether this position will be needed again in the near future, how the work will be managed or dispersed, and the impact on staff in a similar position. 4. Notification. One of a senior management's most unpleasant duties is to announce their restructure and redundancy decision, taken with the organization's best interest at heart, that result in a valued colleague being forced to look for new employment. As a manager, look into each individual's personal situation beforehand so that one has some understanding of the problems they may face. Aim to provide appropriate support, either via an outplacement service or directly. Explain the process and procedure carefully and follow this up in writing. Finding another position is a full-time occupation. A good organization will endeavor to provide support and assistance to cushion the blow and help their people to make the transition. In selecting an outplacement service provider, consider location. Does the outplacement provider have offices and facilities available within a reasonable traveling distance? Budget. Does the outplacement provider have a range of viable solutions to fit one's budget? Timing. Can the outplacement provider respond and be available at the right time for one's organization? Expertise. The service needs to be fit for the purpose. People. Most outplacement consultants are empathetic and experienced, and good outplacement companies will be able to provide profiles of their people demonstrating their collective experience. Method of delivery. Can programs be provided on an individual or group basis? 6. Stabilization. Having provided support and assistance to those directly affected, one needs to turn the attention to those indirectly affected. In varying degrees, this includes all members of the workforce on whom the future of the organization depends. Their emotional reaction to the change needs to be considered and promptly addressed. 7. Managing redundancy is never easy. However, the adverse effects can be substantially reduced through adopting this 7-step approach to managing retrenchment. Essential to the process is good communication, careful analysis and planning, effective consultation, sensitivity in approach, and the provision of appropriate support, assistance, and good ongoing support.
Now we will talk about the recent trends and practices in HRP. The world of work is rapidly changing. As a part of an organization, Human Resource Management, HRM, must be prepared to deal with effects of changing world of work. Globalization and its implications. Business today does not have national boundaries. It reaches around the world. The rise of multinational corporations places new requirements on human resource managers. The HR department needs to ensure that the appropriate mix of employees in terms of knowledge, skills, and cultural adaptability is available to handle global assignments. In order to meet this goal, the organizations must train individuals to meet the challenges of globalization. Workforce diversity. In the past, HRM was considerably simpler because our workforce was strikingly homogeneous. Today's workforce comprises of people of different gender, age, social class, sexual orientation, values, personality characteristics, ethnicity, religion, education, language, physical appearance, marital status, lifestyle, beliefs, ideologies, and background characteristics such as geographic origin, tenure with the organization, and economic status, and the list could go on. Corporate downsizing. Whenever an organization attempts to delayer, it is attempting to create greater efficiency. The premise of downsizing is to reduce the number of workers employed by the organization. The HRM department has a very important role to play in downsizing. HRM people must ensure that proper communication must take place during this time. They must minimize the negative effects of rumors and ensure that individuals are kept informed with factual data. Continuous improvement programs. Continuous improvement programs focus on the long-term well-being of the organization. It is a process whereby an organization focuses on quality and builds a better foundation to serve its customers. This often includes a company-wide initiative to improve quality and productivity. The company changes its operations to focus on the customer and to involve workers in matters affecting them. Re-engineering work. Processes for improved productivity. Although continuous improvement initiatives are positive starts in many organizations, they typically focus on the ongoing incremental change. Such action is intuitively appealing. the constant and permanent search to make things better. Yet, many companies function in an environment that is dynamic, facing rapid and constant change. Employee involvement. For today's organizations to be successful, there are a number of employee involvement concepts that appear to be accepted. These are delegation, participative management, work teams, goal setting, employee training and empowering of employees. HRM has a significant role to play in employee involvement. What is needed is demonstrated leadership as well as supportive management. Now, in the end, let us summarize what we have learned in this lecture. Action planning is the process that guides the day-to-day activities of an organization or project. Workforce planning is a strategic process in which businesses determine how to locate and hire qualified employees. Environmental scanning is also a common workplace planning technique, since most businesses do everything they can to learn about their competition. Strategic capacity planning is a process that seeks to balance the use of available resources so that they are used to the best effect while resulting in the optimum level of output. An employee retention plan is a plan for operating a business using techniques designed to keep good employees. Redundancy is one of the most traumatic events an employee may experience, but the negative effects can be reduced by sensitive handling of redundant employees and those remaining.